So CF Industries, which is one of the largest fertilizer manufacturers in the United States, their CEO came out publicly on the record and said, globally, we're looking for around a 12% reduction in fertilizer. So I've been asking a lot of people who are far more, professional at greenhouse indoor growing, regular farmers around here, and a 12% reduction in fertilizer pretty much equals a 12% reduction in output. Okay, that's an easy 1-to-1 ratio. Then the herbicide shortages are coming in. Again, I just cannot believe that these are all happening at the same time. Otherwise, it's planned. The word anhydrous will become a very common word like social distancing. Anhydrous, urea, potash. These will be like water cooler talk words that'll suddenly pop out of nowhere. Are sanctions and a weaponized U.S. dollar prompting central banks to diversify with gold? As the U.S. imposed the harshest sanctions in history against Putin, the central banks of Saudi Arabia and China have taken notice. Saudi Arabia is considering accepting Chinese yuan for oil sales to China. Could this spell the end of the U.S. dollar as a global reserve currency? Because since March 2020, gold's up 30%, silver's doubled. Goldman Sachs, Bank of America, and Wells Fargo all forecast gold to surpass $2,000 an ounce. Call the Patriot Gold Group today before it's too late. Patriot Gold Group has the no fee for life IRA, where your IRA or 401k can be in physical gold and silver, and you may be eligible for the no fee for life IRA on qualifying rollovers. Call 1-800-356-4470 for a free investor guide today. And with the knowledge that Patriot Gold Group is Consumer Affairs' top-rated gold IRA dealer from 2016 to present, click on the link in the description box below for more information. And now on with the video.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kerry Cassidy from Project Camelot and very happy to be here today. So I have David Devine with me, and we're going to be talking about food, how that's affected by the climate changes we're going through, and much more. So welcome, David, and it's great to have you on the show.
Yeah, thank you, and allowing me to voice my opinion or ideas on how 2022 is going to move and how our society is going to shift during this year because of the available food supply, the pricing. And I really believe a lot of what we're seeing across the planet is to control access to food. When rationing and incredible high food prices come in at the end of the year, and people are going to take to the streets. And then how do you protect yourselves during this time?
Here we are. You're looking, and let's say you're correct in the your evaluation, your critique of what's really going on out there. What is your solution? What are you advising people to do?
If you can go to a farm co-op store and get bags of fertilizer now, you are absolutely, like our grandparents did, going to have to start victory gardens. This is going to be a thing by the end of the year. Organizing with people who have some of the same self-interest that you do of being more self-sufficient, getting the gardens up. I know it's really cold in a lot of places, but here in Tennessee next month, we're going to be warm enough to start getting the initial gardens ready to plant. You got to find people of like mind that are going to want to work together. And the supplies that you can get now, get them, because things are not going to rise in price a little bit. These fertilizer prices, talking to the co-op guys down there, because I have a registered farm, have already doubled. And that's on the wholesale level for people who are buying like 200 tons at a time minimum. They won't even talk to you if you don't buy 200 tons. That's already more than doubled in price on that level. So when you knock it down to like the 5-pound bag or the 10-pound bag that our average gardener might get, they're looking at 5-8 times increase in the prices. And that's going to go across the board for everything. Herbicides, which I don't like to use. I like to keep my place more natural, soap and water if I can, for beetles and things. But a lot of people that are first-time gardeners aren't going to be able to control the pests. You're going to have to learn the pests that are in your area and think about how to control those without using chemical the best you can, and do a little research. But the whole thing is going to be coming down to community and getting the supplies that are going to go short first. And then if you have the funds, get some more food in advance, because the prices are going to get not crazy, but absurd and astronomical. And I really think, Kerry, by the end of the year here, there's going to be rationing. And I think the ration card's going to be tied to your COVID pass. And that might even be tied to your entry into the store like it is in Europe and Australia and so many other places, Austria, Canada as well. They won't even let you go into a farmer's market without it. So where does that leave us? Okay, we see all these things happening. You're going to need to get with people who are of like mind and get your supplies now before they start to get super thin, unavailable. And at the rate it's going, I'm trying to put a timeline together, and I'm hoping that, Kerry, you have a little more deeper insight into how people's psychology is changing right now with what we're seeing. And you're going to have to protect your food too. And anybody who's never raised chickens before, please start. Find your Amish markets. If you know any Amish around your area, go out and know your farmers. If they offer anything at their farms, learn where they are. Get a full-on database list of everybody who's selling food directly from the farm to the consumer. Cut out that farmer's market, cut out anything in the middle. You need to go direct, and you need to get off the supply chains, because those are the things that are going to constrict further. There's going to be more and more and more draconian rules to access those same supply chains. Just an early warning, this is the year, I do believe. So, Kerry, I want to ask you a question then. Like, you've been talking to a lot of people recently. What's their feeling of how the perception of these narratives breaking down across the entire newscape is happening? Because this is going to go lockstep with the awareness, the understanding. And once Mama Bear out there, the mothers of the world, get it, that the inputs for farming aren't going to be there and their prices are going to run away, they're going to be a major part of the society, a demographic that's going to really shift a lot more, demand action. And I don't know how governments are going to respond. But are people waking up, in your opinion, to the plight that we're in now for all this beyond the COVID, for the supply chain breakdowns and the awakenings happening with magnetic field anomalies?
Well, I definitely think that people are, even people that, are, it's not like a vaxxed or a non-vaxxed. This is a different area, right? Supply chain, totally. The rumors about supply chain shutdowns have even, reached the mainstream. So I think people are starting to think along those lines. I know a lot of people are thinking of growing their own food. I mean, that's another aspect of this, right? So, but I don't know, I don't know how successful that is. I don't know going forward if there are limitations in that. I understand like certain limitations could already be built in, like seeds, right? And then you're saying fertilizer. I don't know a lot about it, but you need fertilizer no matter what kind of garden you have. Is that correct? Or is it just limited to certain kind of garden, because we're talking, there's different levels. We're talking an individual or small family with a small plot of land that's not necessarily going to share with their neighbors, but just do for themselves, that kind of thing. And then you've got larger, situations where, like, I think you have some land, people do have land and might be thinking of getting together in groups.
The word anhydrous will become a very common word, like social distancing. Anhydrous, urea, potash. These will be like water cooler talk words that'll suddenly pop out of nowhere.
What is hydrous? What does that mean?
Oh, these are just different fertilizer types that allow higher yields. So CF Industries, which is one of the largest fertilizer manufacturers in the United States, their CEO came out publicly on the record and said, globally, we're looking for around a 12% reduction in fertilizer. So I've been asking a lot of people who are far more, professional at greenhouse indoor growing, regular farmers around here, and a 12% reduction in fertilizer pretty much equals a 12% reduction in output. Okay, that's an easy 1-to-1 ratio. Then the herbicide shortages are coming in. Again, I just cannot believe that these are all happening at the same time. Otherwise, it's planned. And the thing is about these herbicides, and again, I want to say and state this first, I am not a fan of glyphosate at all in any way, shape, or form. It's been known to cause cancer. There's so many lawsuits against the makers of this, and I can't believe it's still allowed to be used on our crops. Now, it's the only thing that'll really hit grass in between the rows of corn. You can use, if you try to use a broadleaf herbicide, which broadleaf is just the plants that grow up, the weeds. I think it's wild edibles myself. You could wild forage and get some food out of that. Some people term them as weeds. If they want to grow a monocrop and something else pops up, it's a weed. But for me, a lot of those, I'm looking around going, wait, that's a leafy vegetable right there. I can eat that. Yeah, maybe another thing. If you can learn how to wild forage or at least identify the edible species around that grow wild, you got the forest is your supermarket. So with these herbicides, the rows between the corn mainly have grass in the emergent stage. Well, if they don't have the Roundup, two things happen. First, the grasses just take over the field and they can grow equally as fast or even faster than the corn and kind of stunt the growth. They're trying to get the same nutrients that were being put on for the corn. They're looking at, 9 bushels per acre minimum at the decline yield if there's grasses in between the rows. Secondly, the Roundup Ready GMO species, as they're planting it, they put the fertilizer behind, and at the same time, they put the Roundup, and then it kills all the weeds pre-emergence, just before the seed breaks, and then it starts to come up. So they eliminate any competition at all. Not even one weed is usually out there to interfere with the production of, I'm going to use corn as the example because I know a lot about that one. So these grasses are going to be in there.
Is GMO. I mean,
so much of it, over 60% in the state.
Yeah. So why would you even look at that? And how does that, are you just trying to talk about producers, like massive producers? That's really who you're talking to right now, because I can't see, even families, I don't see them using these herbicides.
Oh, no, they won't. You're correct. The reason I'm trying to frame this is 60% of everything grown in America is GMO. So you're right. You need those 100,000 acre producers. Those are the ones that sell to General Mills. Those are the ones that sell to XYZ grain mill that'll push it on to any of these companies that'll produce food to put it in the supermarkets. Incredible decline in the yield means there's not enough to go into the mills, and then there'll be a bidding war on that. So when you start to see that, wow, even the things that prevent weeds from going in are going to knock more off of that. So you got a 12% decline because not enough fertilizer. And then you're looking at knocking another percentage off of the yield per acre just because they don't have the herbicides to compete with the plants. Then where does that leave us? If it's not there, it's going to be even lower yields on these cornfields coming in. So at the broader spectrum on the large producers, and I'm not talking about me and you, they're out there at 100,000 acres. What if they only get a 50% emergence? Then what? See, this is where it starts to cascade down into the average supermarket buyer. So all those inputs into getting that just to come up are not there either. So you start to do the math on this and you're going, that's a lot of crop losses. Now, and it's in Europe, it's the same. Australia, it's the same. Canada, it is exactly the same. And then we got the United States and then Russia. They're not going to be selling much. They're cutting off their exports of wheat. Kazakhstan, 10 million tons of wheat that won't be there. I don't know how their planting season's going to go this year. They're politically, again, that whole rail thing and the extra swing producing out of that supplies China. China swoops up that 10 million tons out of Kazakhstan every year. There's a lot of geopolitical things in Ukraine. That's the largest wheat basket in Europe. And who's fighting over that? See, it's all about the food now. And I'll point to the food. A lot of this geopolitics is related to the placement of food, who controls the food growing zones.
Right.
And these crop losses are going into is huge, really huge.
Okay. All right. So in other words, what we may be seeing, even with these sort of talk of war and all that, what's really being divvied up is control of the food.
The top growing spots on the planet.
Because they have an agenda, they're trying to meet. So that you just named 2 places that are under, duress with respect to Russia and supposedly NATO, fighting over them or whatever. And they're both, I guess, big producers of food, right? So is this being engineered in order to allow the Chinese to come in to somewhere like Kazakhstan and take greater control along with Russia? So, or is it, are they trying to kick the Chinese out? Or make it so it just doesn't, as you say, doesn't produce. That could be also an agenda, right? If China is going to be more dependent on the US as a result or somewhere else than Kazakhstan, suddenly you've got a geopolitical tightrope that's being walked that has a way of controlling the way that China approaches the next year or two, right? If they're having to pull back because they can't feed their people without bowing down to areas controlled by either Europe or the United States, something like that. This is just hypothetical thinking, but tell me, is this what you're talking about? Is this in theory where we could be going? And you said, so Ukraine is like this incredible breadbasket, but has that been interfered with over the last few years? Because Ukraine has been in and out of warlike situations now for years. Has that cut back on their production? Or do you know? I mean, these might be off your topic. I don't really know.
They have. They've dropped production, and it's finally ramping back up to where it was prior to 5 years ago. People can start to see, wow, that is a huge producer now. If we go to China for a moment, and pretty much the world, there's going to be no street protests in China about food. Now, food is the thing. People can argue about politics and, my economy is bad and I don't like my government and I want change. I want freedom of speech. Okay, I get it. I really do. But when it comes to food, that's the thing that people will walk in front of machine guns for because they have nothing left to lose. Their families are starving. So how would you prevent that? I mean, China is the most totalitarian place with a known track record of mass famine during these events. And you see this excuse of COVID, what they're doing on so many cities now, Xi'an, they're just like it was in Wuhan. They would just weld people in their buildings and come back with the body cleaning crews later. Oh, everybody's starved. Who cares? We still got 4.5 billion over. Okay, no, we need to knock that number down. So why is it across China? All these things are happening at this very moment to lock people down. Huge amounts of public campaigns of clean your plate. If you order, you can't order more than one dish per person in a restaurant. Well, now all the restaurants are closed. So you can only go at home and cook. It's a more efficient way to save food. I think we've kind of run that course of getting everybody home, knocking out all the restaurants, because the food wastage, you got to think about in the food and bev industry. If we go off to different kind of meeting venues and catering, this sort of thing, there was a huge amount of food wastage. I think up to 40%, 40% was wasted of all the food that was in convention centers, universities, restaurants. So as a planner, you would look out and go, what's the first way we can knock all that down, remove that 40% wastage and get people home so they start cooking at home and there's more food to stretch for another couple of years so we can keep playing out the game so nobody will see it. Oh, now it's gone from that to they're locking people in their houses. China's a huge one here. Like they understand through their history that they collapse every one of these events. So being reliant on the United States, on one of your enemies, is not such a good thing. Although the terrifying part of history is anybody will sell the food and let their own countrymen starve. If you look at the Great Potato Famine that we saw in Ireland, they would export the food past the starving people on the road and have the military shoot them if they got in the way of the wagons leaving. And people were starving to death in that country and they were still exporting the food. Yeah, that is a lot of people want to talk about that. And the most dangerous, and then we'll roll you back a couple hundred years prior in the 1650s, the most dangerous position for an English soldier was guarding the grain shipments from the fields into the cities because they were attacked 100% of the time, 100%, because they saw the same thing. Okay, we're out here growing this food and you, monarchy, come in and steal our food and you're going to leave us out here with not much. Well, what's going on? Okay, we got nothing left to lose except you were going to fight every single time. Well, China gets it too. That's what they always did. How do you think the emperors got overthrown? So now there's this ready-made excuse to lock the entire planet down, control them with the police state in place. And anytime it comes down to it, citizens versus army, citizens versus police, there's already a ready-made task force to get in there to stop and quell the unrest. It will spill to the streets, no doubt. But for right now, there's still some international trade going on, and who's reliant on who. Because if you're a country and you need more food, I would look at an area, and I'm going to go a little woo-woo here. I would look at an area that's not being grown as a crop growing zone right now, but that could be the world's largest breadbasket, almost doubling what America and Canada are combined. And I would look at that and say, where is that place? North Africa. Now, you have to put a couple factors here. First, the West African monsoon is shifting. It's been shifting for 30 years or so, but now it's in earnest, dropping an enormous amount of more rainfall from West Africa heading all the way into the Sahel. Now, that's a natural pattern. That's a once in a 4,000 year shift, and it's starting to shift again. So you start to look out at these longer cycles of climate versus 70 or 40 years of this satellite data, or 120 years or 150 years. Now we're talking about 4,000 year cycles here starting to repeat. So the natural rainfall is really increasing off the Western African peninsulas, rolling all the way into the Sahel. But at the same time, in the Indian Ocean, if you've been paying attention, there's massive floods across Oman, Saudi Arabia. The driest places in the world are getting flooded from cyclone after cyclone after cyclone. And somebody with the magic crystal ball put the Africa's largest hydroelectric dam in the driest place in Africa, in Eritrea in Sudan, and scratched their head and said, rain gods, please fill it up. And you know what? It was supposed to take 7 years to fill that thing, and it filled in 2. So all these extra storms, there we go, geoengineering again. So who would put a hydroelectric dam in the driest place and then fill it in 2 years? Then you look at it and you say, Nubian sandstone aquifer, it's the most underground water resource across the planet. Now, if you could tap that, bring up that water from under the ground, brand new water, brand new. There's some primary water sources there too. But Nubian sandstone aquifer, this is the aquifer that runs under all of North Africa. So now you have increasing precipitation above ground, and then the West African monsoon shifting, blowing in an enormous amount of rain all the way from Chad into Niger and these different areas. And then you tap the underground water resources. You got the above ground water resources increasing from natural shifts in cycle. Problem is, there's a lot of people there. There were a lot of people there. Man, this mass migration thing to get 10 million men of fighting age off of that and out into the continent in Europe. Now there's no resistance there. You could just go in and set up a new grow zone. And this is what I think the ultimate plan was for this migration out of Africa into Europe, to get all the resistance fighting age men out of there and set up the new world's grow zone in there. You're getting double crops, double rotated crops, some of the cleanest water on the planet to grow those crops with. And with new energy devices, if you're looking at magnetic motors, pairing to have magnetic motors, and a huge amount of other tech that's about to be
fascinating. Sorry about that. You could really, if you had magnetic motors to power that, you would not even need to put a grid out. You could individually install those magnetic motors across the areas for the pumping that you would need and the distribution. Okay, but do you think that what's happening in Africa, because we also hear about Chinese, building cities in Africa and so on and so forth. Yeah. Do you think that that's also part of that game?
Oh, absolutely. They built the ports along the East Coast to try to bring the grains by rail from those mid areas in Chad. Now, if you look out in Chad, if anybody has Earth Viewer and a NASA Earth Viewer, go down into central Chad and you'll start to see a bunch of 100 mile by 100 mile squares that are right there where the dry area terminates, but it's getting wetter. And if you can look at the vegetation index and see how the satellites are picking up the new vegetation growing year by year, you'll easily see those 100 by 100 square mile squares. That's China out there growing using the water from under the desert. And then they take it by rail and take it out in Kenya, and then across their string of pearls. And then Gwadar is the next one over in Pakistan. And they go around India, and then they unload again. In Myanmar, Jakpyu Port. And see, this is how I knew about this whole thing, because I was working in Myanmar doing the coffee. I never would have known about Jakpyu Port and that little tiny stretch of railroad. Instead of going all the way around through the Malacca Straits to get your stuff back to China, they would unload in Jakpyu Port, which is the largest oil unloading terminal, by the way. And it's only a couple 100 miles across that to get into Yunnan province over, and Kunming is the capital of that. So you bypass the entire American stranglehold, and it's a much shorter trip also. So you grow the food in Africa, you bring in all your militarized string of pearls, and you drop it off in Myanmar, and you send it by rail a couple hundred miles, and it ends up in Western China. You know, there's a lot going on here, and before, maybe in the 1950s, it was all about oil, and we all know that. We could read a lot of books on how the world was controlled. Oil with the Rockefellers, probably going back in the 1920s and 10s, central banking. But now it's going to be about the food. Mm-hmm. So the central banks in 1913, then it was all about the oil and the control of the world, using oil as the mechanism for all these wars and things and setting up. But look, it's shifting over to food now, and they don't want a lot of people on the planet. If they knock the population down by half, we wouldn't have these problems, and all these grow zones would be put out without much resistance.
Yes, I see some good signs, but I also see some, just insane signs of just not getting a grip and not listening to the real science and being completely diluted by all of it. So when you throw these shortages, sorry, go ahead.
Well, how do you break through that? Because so many people are into that narrative. Even if you present alternative information that's 180 degrees, what happens to the average person on the ground that's just getting tennised all over the place? Bing, bing, new information, contradictory information.
Well, I think,
but they won't step out of it.
The fear. See, this idea of fear is addictive. Fear is driving almost everything that's going on right now in terms of what decisions people are making is based on fear. And it's fear of scarcity, fear of that they themselves are not in command of their world, that someone else has to come and pat them on the head, take care of them, do this or that for them. It's always externalizing the responsibility off of the person themselves, and, taking responsibility for your family and your own health and so on and so forth. So I think that, and that's like a snowball. So fear in a way is like a snowball. And in certain communities, it definitely, gets traction and like rolls down the hill, right? And gets bigger and bigger as it goes down. So there's that aspect. Then, of course, you've got the people like us who basically have said no, planted our feet in the ground and said, absolutely not. And that may come to a head in the midst of this other engineered weather war situation, and then the scarcity in terms of food and access. So, I mean, it's a petri dish full of planned, devolutionary plans that are based on eliminating population of. If you eliminate the fear, you're never going to have these problems, because people will take action. They won't see fear as being an impediment. Right now, if you have fear, you have an impediment to action of any kind,